That's
I don't even necessarily disagree with these two on this point. It feels like they play so like loose with their terms here. Again, it is perfectly fine to deliberately attack civilians. What's bad is making civilians the object of an attack. To do it with the purpose of killing civilians. For a lot of operations, like drone strikes, they literally like consult lawyers.
then when you start talking about
Oh no, Hassan, please, Hassan, you can make a basic moral analysis. Hassan, you are not morally blind. Come on, please.
all of a sudden you've discovered morality.
First question is about 1948. For Israelis, 1948 is the establishment of the State of Israel and the War of Independence. For Palestinians, 1948 is the Nakba, which means catastrophe, or the displacement of 700,000 Palestinians from their homes as a consequence of the war. What to you is important to understand about the events of 1948 and the period around there, 47, 49, that helps us understand what's going on today, and maybe helps us understand the roots of all of this that started even before 1948. I was hoping that Norm can speak first, then Benny, then Ween, and then Norm.
After World War II,
Oh
the
dear God.
British decided that they didn't want to deal with the Palestine question anymore, and the ball was thrown into the court of the United Nations. Now, as I read the record, the UN was not attempting to arbitrate or adjudicate rights and wrongs.
I'm actually okay. I'm actually gonna have to put Norm in at least 1.5 times speed every time he talks. God damn it.
Confronting a very practical problem. There were two national communities in Palestine, and there were irreconcilable differences.
I can't believe this is 1.5 times speed. What the fuck?
Looking at the historic record on the question of immigration, and associated with the question of immigration, the question of land. The UN Special Committee on Palestine, which came into being before the UN 181 partition resolution, the UN Special Committee, it recommended two states in Palestine. There was a minority position represented by Iran, India, Yugoslavia. They supported one state, but they believed that if forced to, the two communities would figure out some sort of modus vivendi and live together. The United Nations General Assembly supported partition between what it called a Jewish state and an Arab state. Now, in my reading of the record, and I understand there's new scholarship in the subject, which I've not read, but so far as I've read the record, there's no clarity on what the United Nations General Assembly meant by a Jewish state and an Arab state, except for the fact that the Jewish state would be demographically, the majority would be Jewish, and the Arab state demographically would be Arab. The UNSCOP, the UN Special Committee on Palestine, it was very clear, and it was reiterated many times, that in recommending two states, each state, the Arab state and the Jewish state, would have to guarantee full equality of all citizens with regard to political, civil, and religious matters. Now that does raise the question, if there is absolute full equality of all citizens
Oh,
of
no.
the Jewish state and the Arab state with regard to political rights, civil rights, and religious rights, apart from the demographic majority, it's very unclear what it meant to call a state Jewish or call a state Arab. In my view, the partition resolution was the correct decision. I do not believe that the Arab and Jewish communities could, at that point, be made to live together. I disagree with the minority position of India, Iran, and Yugoslavia, and that not being a practical option, two states was the only other option. In this regard, I would want to pay tribute to what was probably the most moving speech at the UN General Assembly proceedings by the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. I was very tempted to quote it at length, but I recognized that would be taking too much time. So I asked a young friend, Jamie Stern-Weiner, to edit it and just get the essence of what Foreign Minister Gromyko had to say. During the last war, Gromyko said, the Jewish people underwent exceptional sorrow and suffering. Without any exaggeration, this sorrow and suffering are indescribable. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are wandering about in various countries of Europe, in search of means of existence and in search of shelter. The United Nations cannot and must not regard this situation with indifference. Past experience, particularly during the Second World War, shows that no Western European state was able to provide adequate assistance for the Jewish people in defending its rights and its very existence from the violence of the Hitlerites and their allies. This is an unpleasant fact, but unfortunately, like all other facts, it must be admitted. Gromyko went on to say, in principle, he supports one state, or the Soviet Union supports one state, but he said, if relations between the Jewish and Arab populations of Palestine proved to be so bad that it would be impossible to reconcile them and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of the Arabs and the Jews, the Soviet Union would support two states. I personally am not convinced that the two states would have been unsustainable in the long term if, and this is a big if, the Zionist movement had been faithful to the position it proclaimed during the UNSCOP public hearings. At the time, Ben-Gurion testified, quote, I want to express what we mean by a Jewish state. We mean by a Jewish state simply a state where the majority of the people are Jews, not a state where a Jew has in any way any privilege more than anyone else. A Jewish state means a state based on absolute equality of all her citizens and on democracy. Alas, this was not to be. As Professor Morris has written, quote,
yeah, I am playing
Zionist
Wizard 101 because it
ideology
takes
and
no
practice
brain power.
were necessarily and elementally expansionist.
You just follow the arrow at
And
the
then
bottom of
wrote
the
in another
screen
book,
and just click on
transfer,
like
euphemism for
next.
expulsion, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism because it sought to transform a land which was Arab into a Jewish state. And a Jewish state could not have arisen without a major displacement of Arab population. And because this aim automatically produced resistance among the Arabs, which in turn persuaded the Yeshuv's leaders, the Yeshuv being the Jewish community, the Yeshuv's leaders that a hostile Arab majority or large minority could not remain in place if a Jewish state was to arise or safely endure. Or, as Professor Morris retrospectively put it, quote, a removing of a population was needed. Without a population expulsion.
It's so funny because this guy, Norman Finkelstein, is literally quoting
Jewish state
his opponent.
would not have been established, unquote. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright the partition resolution, while Israeli leaders, acting under compulsions inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism, found the pretext in the course of the first Arab-Israeli war to expel the indigenous population and expand its borders. I therefore conclude that neither side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it.
Thank you, Norm. Norm asked that we make a lengthy statement in the beginning. Benny, I hope it's okay to call everybody by their first name in the name of camaraderie. Norm has
Right, now I can put it in normal speed again.
Perhaps you can comment broadly on the question of 1948 and maybe respond to the things that Norm said.
Yeah. UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, recommended partition. The majority of UNSCOP recommended partition, which was accepted by the UN General Assembly in November 1947, essentially looking back to the Peel Commission in 1937. 10 years earlier, a British commission had looked at the problem of Palestine, the two warring national groups who refused to live together, if you like, or consolidate.
I didn't realize it. Oh, Norm talks so slow, dude. Unbelievably slow.
That's the principle. The country must be partitioned into two states. This would give a modicum of justice to both sides.
It's 5 hours long. Do you really need to hear? Yeah.
And the United
Obviously.
Nations followed suit. The United Nations, UNSCOP, and then the UN General Assembly, representing the will of the international community, said two states is the just solution in this complex situation. The problem was that immediately with the passage of the resolution, the Arab states and the Arabs of Palestine said no, as Norman Finkelstein said. They said no. They rejected the partition idea, the principle of partition, not just the idea of what percentage which side should get, but the principle of partition. They said no to. The Jews should not have any part of Palestine for their sovereign territory. Maybe Jews could live as a minority in Palestine. That also was problematic in the eyes of the Palestinian Arab leadership. Husseini had said only Jews who were there before 1917 could actually get citizenship and continue to live there. But the Arabs rejected partition, and the Arabs of Palestine launched, in very disorganized fashion, war against the resolution, against the implementation of the resolution, against the Jewish community in Palestine. And this was their defeat in that civil war between the two communities while the British were withdrawing from Palestine. Led to the Arab invasion, the invasion by the Arab states in May 1948 of the country. Again, basically with the idea of eradicating or preventing the emergence of a Jewish state in line with the United Nations decision and the will of the international community. Norman said that the Zionist enterprise, and he quoted me, meant from the beginning.
Wait, do I need to go here?
To transfer or expel the Arabs of Palestine, or some of the Arabs of Palestine. And I think he's sort of quoting out of context. The context in which the statements were made that the Jewish state could only emerge if there was a transfer of Arab population was preceded, in the way I wrote it and the way it actually happened, by Arab resistance and hostilities towards the Jewish community. Had the Arabs accepted partition, there would have been a large Arab minority in the Jewish state which emerged in 47. And in fact, Jewish economists and state builders took into account that there would be a large Arab minority and its needs would be cared for, etc.
I need to reconcile. I don't know how. The problem is, I don't know how to reconcile, because I trust Benny Morris as a historian generally, right? I need to reconcile what Benny Morris is saying here and what we read on stream in Scars of War, where there were basically a lot of Zionist leaders who essentially wanted a Jewish state because they didn't like the immigration requirements or the immigration quotas that the British were putting on them. Oh shoot, hold on. Damn it. Okay. And they basically felt that after they got their state, it doesn't matter how small it was because they'd be independent and they could basically not have to listen to the British anymore, and from there they could expand.
But this was not to be, because the Arabs attacked, and had they not attacked, perhaps a Jewish state with a large Arab minority could have emerged, but this didn't happen. They went to war, the Jews resisted, and in the course of that war, Arab populations were driven out. Some were expelled, some left because Arab leaders advised them to leave or ordered them to leave. And at the end of the war, Israel said they can't return because they just tried to destroy the Jewish state. And that's the basic reality of what happened in 48. The Jews created a state. The Palestinian Arabs never bothered to even try to create a state before 48 and in the course of the 1948 war. And for that reason, they have no state to this day. The Jews do have a state because they prepared to establish a state, fought for it, and established it hopefully lastingly.
When you said hostility, in case people are not familiar, there was a full-on war where Arab states invaded, and Israel won that war.
Let me just add to clarify. The war had two parts to it. The first part was the Arab community in Palestine, its militiamen, attacked the Jews from November 1947. In other words, from the day after the UN partition resolution was passed, Arab gunmen were busy shooting up Jews, and that snowballed into a full-scale civil war between the two communities in Palestine. In May 1948, a second stage began in the war in which the Arab states invaded the new state, attacked the new state, and they too were defeated, and thus a state of Israel emerged. In the course of this two-stage war, a vast Palestinian refugee problem occurred.
And so after that, the transfer, the expulsion, the thing that people call the Nakba happened. William, could you speak
What was
to
during that?
1948? And
I
the
can't
historical
see Wizard
significance of it?
101.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here.
I don't know what to tell you, man. You
Try
don't
to
even.
limit
You can
myself
literally see it. It's
to
fine.
Just a few points regarding Zionism and transfer. I think Chaim Weizmann, the head of
Why
the
not
World
put the
Zionist
debate in the corner?
Organization,
Because
had it exactly right.
What do you mean?
When he said that the objective of Zionism is to make
What corner?
Palestine as
Oh,
Jewish
this. You mean
as
like here?
England is English,
Because
or
so you can
France is
see
French.
like my health and stuff,
In other words,
or the enemy's health.
as Norman explained, a Jewish state requires.
Because it's really important you see
Jewish
Wizard 101. Nobody needed to see that.
demographic and territorial supremacy. Without those three elements, the state.
All my viewers are here for
Jewish
Wizard
name
101.
only. And I think what distinguishes Zionism is its insistence, supremacy, and exclusivity. That would be my first point. The second point is, I think what the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Andrei Gromyko, said is exactly right, with one reservation. Gromyko was describing a European savagery unleashed against Europe's Jews. At the time, it wasn't Palestinians or Arabs. The savages and the barbarians were European to the core. It had nothing to do with developments in Palestine.
Bro, the game is on the screen. You can see like it's fine, bro.
Secondly, at the time that Gromyko was speaking, those Jewish survivors of the Holocaust and others who were in need of safe haven were still overwhelmingly on the European continent. And
Fuck, I'm
not
gonna
on
die.
Palestine, not in Palestine. And I think, given the scale of the savagery, I don't think that any one state or country should have borne the responsibility for addressing this crisis. I think it should have been an international responsibility. The Soviet Union could have contributed.
This guy talks though too. Goddamn.
Germany certainly could and should have contributed. The United Kingdom and the United States, which slammed their doors shut to the persecuted Jews of Europe as the Nazis were rising to power, they certainly should have played a role. But instead, what passed for the international community at the time decided to partition Palestine. And here I think we need to judge the partition resolution against the realities that obtained at the time. Two-thirds of the population of Palestine was Arab. The Yishuv, the Jewish community in Palestine, constituted about 1/3 of the total population and controlled even less of the land within Palestine. As a preeminent Palestinian historian, Walid al-Khalidi has pointed out.
How do you spell the? Okay. Settling the land in a way that created Jewish continuity and demographic superiority was not to be an enterprise to be executed after the victory. Rather, it was part of the war itself. Well, this was. This is the only time I mentioned the desert. Hold on. Oh, hi, Melanie. Is that really the only time I could have sworn there was a, maybe it was after the war started and I'm just misremembering things, but I don't know. The reason the Jews got like the majority of the land, even though they were like 1/3 of the population, was basically because a lot of their land was the Negev desert, which doesn't really have much in it. And they had like explicitly sort of started trying to settle that area because they thought it was easier to do that than to settle areas where Arabs already were. and there weren't many in the Negev desert.
But the idea of establishing an exclusively Jewish state at the expense of those who are already living there, I think it was right to reject that. And I don't think we can look back now, 75 years later, and say, well, you should have accepted losing 55% of your homeland because you ended up losing 78% of it, and the remaining 22% was occupied in 1967.
I don't even necessarily disagree with these two on this point. It feels like it's really hard to look at it like retrospectively, knowing what happened to Palestinians because they didn't accept the partitions. Yeah, and then I don't know. I feel like I understand the Zionists felt they had justification for moving to Palestine because the British essentially told them that they were entitled to a state there. But I don't necessarily disagree with him at this point. I think the Palestinians arguably did have justification for fighting in 48.
That's not how things work.
Yeah.
And I can imagine an American rejecting giving 10% of the United States to the Palestinians, and if that rejection leads to war and you lose half your country, I doubt that 50 years from now you're going to say, well, maybe I should have accepted that.
Sure. So I like this answer more than what I usually feel like I'm hearing when it comes to the Palestinian rejection of the 47 partition plan. Because sometimes I feel like a weird switch happens to where the Arabs in the area are actually presented as entirely pragmatic people who are simply doing a calculation and saying like, well, we're losing 55% of our land, Jews are only maybe 1/3 of the people here, and we've got 45, and the math doesn't work basically. But it wasn't a math problem. I think, like you said,
it was a matter of principle.
It was an ideology problem.
No, it was a matter of principle.
Yeah, ideologically driven. That they, as a people, have a right to or are entitled to this land that they've never actually had an independent state on, that they've never had even a guarantee of an independent state on, that they've never actually ruled a government of their own.
That last point is actually not correct, because for all its injustice, the mandate system recognized Palestine as a Class A mandate, which provisionally recognized.
But that was but the mandate for Palestine included all of Transjordan, right? So, and Jordan is an independent state, yeah.
Recognized the independence of that territory.
Of what would emerge from that territory, but not of the Palestinian.
It was provisionally recognized.
But the territory itself was, but not of the Palestinian people to have a right or a guarantee to a government that would emerge from it.
It was a British mandate of Palestine, not the British mandate of Israel.
The word exclusive, which you keep using, is nonsense. The state which Ben Gurion envisioned would be a Jewish majority state, as they accepted the 1947 partition resolution, as Stephen said. That included 400,000 plus Arabs in a state which would have 500,000 Jews. So the idea of exclusivity wasn't anywhere in the air at all among the Zionist leaders in 47, 48. They wanted a Jewish majority state, but were willing to accept a state which had 40% Arabs. That's one point. The second thing is the Palestinians may have regarded the land of Palestine as their homeland, but so did the Jews. It was the homeland of the Jews as well. The problem was the Arabs were unable, and remain to this day, unable to recognize that for the Jews, that is their homeland as well. And the problem then is, how do you share this homeland? Either with one binational state or separate this, partitioned into two states. The problem is that the Arabs have always rejected both of these ideas. The homeland belongs to the Jews, as Jews feel, as much as it does, if not more, than for the Arabs.
Jews.
I would say for the Jews. It's the Jewish people's
I would also,
homeland.
real quick, I just want for both of you guys, because I haven't heard these questions answered. I really want these questions to be, I'm just so curious how to make sense of them. It was correctly brought up that I believe that Ben Gurion had, I think Shlomo Ben-Ami describes it as an obsession with getting validation or support from Western states, Great Britain, and then a couple decades later,
That explains the Suez War, the Suez crisis.
Exactly, correct. That was one of the major motivators, the idea to work with Britain and France on a military operation
Imperial
against Arabs.
stooge.
But then the question again I go back to, if that is true, if Ben Gurion, if the early Israel saw themselves as a Western fashion nation, how could we possibly imagine that they would have engaged in the transfer of some 400,000 Arabs after accepting the partition plan? Would that not have completely and totally destroyed their legitimacy in the eyes of the entire Western world? Would
No.
there not have been? How not?
Well, first of all, I think that the Zionist leadership's acceptance of the partition resolution, and I think you may have written about this, that they accepted it because it provided international endorsement of the legitimacy of the principle of Jewish statehood, and they didn't accept the borders. And in fact, later expanded the borders. Second of all,
No, they did
The borders
they did
were
accept the
expanded in
borders.
war.
They accepted the UN partition resolution, borders and all.
They
That's how they
accepted-
accepted it.
they
You
accepted
can say that some of the Zionists, deep in their hearts, had the idea that maybe
well,
at some point
including
they
their
would be able to get
yeah,
more.
including
But
their
they
most senior
accept-
leaders who said
Yes,
so,
but
and
they
I think you've
accepted-
quoted them
but
as saying
they
so.
grudgingly accepted what the United Nations,
yes.
the world community,
Yes.
had said. This is what you're
Yes.
going to get.
And second of all, I mean,
But the question really is like whether or not they accepted that with the intention of being able to expand in the future after they basically didn't have to rely on the British anymore, because the British were actively putting like immigration quotas on Israel at the time, right?
Each and every word.
I hate this guy talking. I do too, man. Listen, it's super annoying because I want to put it like he said. It's fun to put it like in 1.5 times speed. But then when the people respond, they talk too fast because they talk
Quote from
fast
that quote
like
is
usually.
by claiming that it's either out of context or it's cherry picking words.
Bro, you literally pulled out an you literally quoted the other guy in the room with you right now, and then he said it's out of context. Yeah, obviously. Bro, you did quote him out of context, bro. I don't know.
Hamlet. And I agree with Lex. Everybody has the right to rescind what they've said in the past. But what you cannot claim is that you didn't say what you said.
I'll stick to the history, not the current propaganda.
Yeah, I don't even know. I can't believe they've been talking about this for 2 hours though, and they haven't got to like anywhere, man.
And muddling on.
Because Norm will just quote Benny Morris out of context, and Benny Morris will say, well, that's out of context. And then Norm will say, well, you said what you said, and you can everyone has the right to discount what they said earlier, but you can't claim you didn't say it, and you said this. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's out of context. Well, you said it. What the fuck? Yo, these guys are awesome. Gobbler, Scouter.
And the reason is that a proportion of Israeli civilians killed on October 7th, I don't believe it was a majority. We don't know how many. Some were killed in crossfire. Some were killed by Israeli shell fire, helicopter fire, and so on. And the majority were killed by Palestinians. And of that majority, we don't know. I mean, again, I understood your question is referring specifically to Hamas, which is why I tried to answer it that way.
It's just like literally, it doesn't even matter. Like, what matters is the intent. Is that like, well, if Israel killed its civilians in crossfire, it didn't like intend to kill the civilians. It didn't have genocidal intent towards its own civilians, right? Whereas Hamas probably did.
If you meant generically Palestinians, yes. If you mean specifically Hamas, we don't have a clear breakdown of how
No, I don't
many
mean
were
specifically
killed.
Hamas,
Okay.
but I just think when you use the word some, that's doing a lot of heavy
Who
lifting.
used some?
That's fine, but some can mean anywhere from 1% to 49%.
But we don't know.
Some.
So the numbers here and the details are interesting and important almost from a legal perspective. But if we zoom out, the moral perspective, are Palestinians from Gaza justified in violent resistance?
Well, Palestinians have the right to resistance. That right includes the right to armed resistance. At the same time, armed resistance is subject to the laws of war. And there are very clear regulations that separate legitimate acts of armed resistance from acts of armed resistance that are not legitimate. And
The attacks of October 7th, where did they land for you?
there's been almost exclusive focus on the attacks on civilian population centers and the killings of civilians on October 7th. what is much less discussed, to the point of amnesia, is that there were very extensive attacks on Israeli military and intelligence facilities on October 7th. I would make a very clear distinction between those two. And secondly, I'm not sure that I would characterize the efforts by Palestinians on October 7th to seize Israeli territory and Israeli population centers as in and of themselves illegitimate.
You mean attacking Israeli civilians? is
No,
legitimate?
no, that's not what I
didn't
said.
understand what you said.
I think what you had on October 7th was an effort by Hamas to seize Israeli territory and population
And
centers.
kill civilians.
That's not what I said. What I said
Oh
is
my
I
God.
think I would not describe the effort to seize Israeli territory as in and of itself illegitimate, as a separate issue.
Thinks Hamas has justification for seizing Israeli territory. That seems unhinged, man.
From the killing of Israeli civilians, where in those cases where they have been deliberately targeted, that's very clearly
Whole
illegitimate.
families were slaughtered in kibbutzim.
But I'm making
Thank
But
you.
many
Wait,
of them,
quick.
many
I
of them
think-
left-wingers,
I think-
incidentally, who helped Palestinians go to hospitals in Israel and so on.
Again-
Even drove Palestinian cancer patients to hospitals in
again,
Israeli.
I'm making a
But you
distinction
don't seem
here.
to be very condemnatory of what the Hamas did.
Well, I don't do selective condemnation.
I'm not talking about selective.
I
I'm
don't
talking
do
about
selective
specific
outrage.
condemnation of this specific
Well, you know
assault
what it- you
on
know what it
civilians.
is. You know,
I would, for example, condemn Israeli assaults on civilians, deliberate assaults on civilians.
Yes,
I would
and-
condemn them, but you're not doing that
You know,
with the Hamas.
you know what the issue is?
What?
I've been speaking in public now, I would say since the late 1980s, and interviewed and so on. I have never on one occasion ever been asked to condemn any Israeli act. When I've been in group discussions,
Because you're on the Palestinian side. I would, yeah, that makes sense. If you were on the Israeli side, like if you were a Zionist, I would expect that, like, you obviously already condemn the attacks that, like, Israel or that Palestine does. So if you were a Zionist, you'd probably be asked to condemn attacks that Israel has done. Yeah, like, I don't. It's just implicit in your position that you already condemn those attacks. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have that position.
those supporting the Israeli action or perspective, I have never encountered an example where these individuals are asked to condemn what Israel is doing. The demand and obligation of condemnation is exclusively applied, in my personal experience over decades, is exclusively applied to Palestinians
No, this is
and those.
nonsense.
Well,
Israel is condemned day and night.
I don't. I just don't think that's true. I have conversations with people, and I yell at Zionists in my chat, man. I don't know what you mean.
The television channels on every and has been for the
I'm
last
telling
decade.
you about a
Morris,
personal experience
Professor
lasting
Morris,
decades.
You said, quote.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
I'm trying to quote what you just said.
I shouldn't
You
have said anything at any point.
You should say,
Uh-oh.
Professor Morris.
Yes.
You just said, I would condemn
And I have
anytime
condemned.
Israel deliberately attacks civilians.
Yes.
Okay. The problem, Professor Morris, is
I hate that. I just don't. They play so loose with their terms here. Again, it is perfectly fine to deliberately attack civilians. Everybody acknowledges this, okay? It is purposely fine to knowingly attack civilians sometimes if it's proportional, right? If every single Hamas commander was in a room with one person, with one civilian, I think everyone would acknowledge it'd probably be okay to blow up that room, even if you know that person is likely to die. What's bad is making civilians the object of an attack. To do it with the purpose of killing civilians, it's not bad to, I don't understand.
over and over again, you claim in the
You just say there's a difference between targeting, because targeting implies purpose, and then attacking just implies knowledge.
of overwhelming evidence that they didn't attack civilians.
And it
not true,
again, additional protocol 1 only. Hold on, that's targeting an extinction, intent, targeting intent. Mere knowledge of risks to nearby civilians is insufficient to establish a violation of the principle of distinction, but the doctrine of double effect is also often used to describe situations where the attacker is virtually or practically certain that innocent civilians will be killed, though the attacker's purpose is to kill a legitimate target. Such situations are best described as acting with knowledge, a much higher mental state than acting recklessly or dolus eventialis. In short, defenders of the doctrine of double effect sometimes trade on the model penal code distinction between acting with purpose and acting with knowledge. Under this view, it would be permissible to kill the protected persons if the purpose of the attack is to kill legitimate targets. In other words, violating the principle of distinction requires that the attacking force act with full-blown dolus directus. Whereas, yeah. Even if collateral damage is foreseen and certain, it does not fall under the definition of intent associated with with Section 51. Or sorry, this should be... I should say Article 51, Section 2 of the Additional Protocol 1, which states the civilian population as such, as well as individual civilians, shall not be the object of attack, acts, or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian populations. The phrase directed and shall not be the object suggest a volitional component associated with purpose rather than just knowledge. Also, as the ICRC commentary notes, the second sentence is undoubtedly applies an intent standard that accords with purpose, not mere knowledge.
A PLO-run hospital suffered a direct hit. Thousands of refugees are returning to the city. When they arrive at their homes, many of which have been destroyed or damaged, you hear their cries of pain and their howls over the deaths of their loved ones. The air is permeated with the smell of corpses. Destruction and death are continuing. Does that sound like your description of the Lebanon war?
Forget my descriptions.
Forget it?
The point you're
Words
making...
are in print. We can't just
let me
forget them.
just finish my sentence. The point you're making, which you somehow forget, is that there are Israelis who strongly criticize their own side and describe how Israelis are doing things which they regard as immoral. You don't find that on the Arab side.
I'm talking about you, Mr. Morris. I'm not talking about Dev Darmy. I'm talking about you, the historian.
Oh my
How
God.
did you depict the Lebanon war?
I believe that the Israeli military tried to avoid committing a civilian casualty.
So Dev,
as I think they
as well?
all the accounts by Robert Fisk and Pity the
Robert
Nation.
Fisk is
I know.
anti-Zionist
I know.
journalist.
I know.
Has always been.
Right. So that's why you can say with such confidence that you don't condemn deliberate Israeli attacks on civilians.
I'm bro with someone else because he's cool. Check out Nonfon. He's cute and based. Thanks right now. Or thanks. Jesus.
Because there weren't.
I just can't. This is so annoying. I just don't. I'm so like. I hate how much I've become like so like West good pilled. Cause like I don't understand, like they constantly like bring up the stuff like, oh, a hospital was struck. It's like, oh, okay, well, what do they think? You've infiltrated a political stream of space. Good job, bro. Yeah, sick. That's good though. I know. I just hate like I hate how like it's because the people around me are like super left leaning. So it's just annoying because they're like, oh yeah, we do bad things, but like even the fucked up shit that Israel does do. So wait, okay. What's the there's a city in Lebanon that like Israel carpet bombed. Was it Dahia Doctrine? Yeah, Dahia Doctrine. Yeah. Israel's like basically morale bombing, right? Is a military strategy involving the destruction of civilian infrastructure to pressure hostile regimes. So like I think we can like look at this and say like, wow, that, you know, morale bombing and stuff, that's kind of fucked up. That's kind of, you know, I think that's bad. But like, it's like the reason Israel was doing this was basically in the long run to prevent Syrian casualties, because they thought by doing this wrongly, right, that they were like pressuring Lebanon into surrendering, right? Like it's just so like, yeah. The Israeli Defense Force on the civilian infrastructure regards to it may constitute the extension of the doctrine. If your friends are in America, bad people dump them. Listen, some of them dumped me. I don't want to like leak DMs or anything, but I had a friend from school that like we literally got into an argument about like Israel Palestine, and like I don't know at the end of our conversation, last conversation, I don't even know what she was arguing, because I literally like asked her like, so you think like Gaza has a justification to invade Israel proper because in 1948 this land was stolen? Like I don't it seemed like she was unironically arguing that Palestine just has a right to constantly invade Israel. And I was like, I think the thing that made her block me was I said, at some point you have to accept it's not your land anymore, and you have to start making efforts for peace. And to that she said like, you're so white. Oh my God, I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah, you
And
didn't?
You agreed that I have condemned Israeli attacks
Yes, there are
on civilians.
I never quarrel with facts. Your description of the 1982 war is
Oh wait, sorry. I have to.
so shocking, it makes my innards writhe. And then your description of the Second Intifada, your description of defensive shield,
When the Arabs were bombing, when Arab suicide bombers were destroying Jews in masses in buses and in restaurants. That's the Second Intifada. Do you remember that?
You can try
Suicide bombers in Jerusalem's buses and restaurants.
I am completely aware of that. But if you forgot the numbers,
I don't forget
it was 3-1.
They killed mostly armed Palestinian gunmen.
That's what you say in your
what I
book.
Oh my God,
But
that's what you
Amnesty
say.
International said. That's not what.
Haha, that's always, yeah. It's always the last thing they try. Jesus, sorry, I'm tired. That's always the last thing they try after they're defeated. Yeah, but you're white, so sorry, you're wrong. That's how you know. I mean, like, we weren't, like, super close. It's not like we were, like, super close friends or anything. Like, we were, like, acquaintances. It was just, yeah.
Remember what they said?
I do.
No,
that's not what
I don't know whether their
said.
figures are right. My figures are right.
Listen.
In the Second Intifada, some 4,000 Palestinians.
Where was Goncourt?
Most
I don't
of them
remember.
were armed people, and the Israelis, 1,000 Israelis were killed. Almost
I think you're trying to give high schoolers that try to involve themselves in politics too much credit. I mean, like, I don't. Yeah, they're learning how to be. Yeah, I mean, too. I'm also a high schooler. Like, but I don't know. They're just Hassan viewers. Like, quite frankly, like, I don't know. Like, yeah, and not based. Very Sam Harris readers.
Fantasy, but I'm not going to argue with here. Here's a simple challenge. You said not to look at the camera. Scares the people. I'll make the open challenge.
You are going to scare them.
No, Professor Morris.
Open challenge.
Words are in print. I wrote 50 pages analyzing all of your work. I quote, some will say cherry pick, but I think accurately quote you. Here's a simple challenge.
I don't understand. I think I accurately quote you. Well, you're in the room with the person and he's like, no, that's out of context, and then explains the context behind it. It's just so fucking dumb, man.
Answer me in print. Answer what I wrote and show where I'm making things up.
Answer me in print.
I'm sorry,
okay,
I'm not familiar with
that's no problem. You're a busy man. You're an important historian. You don't have to know everything that's in print, especially by modest publishers. But now you know. And so here's the public challenge. You answer and show where I cherry-picked, where I misrepresented.
Send me the article.
Fine. And then we can have a civil, scholarly discussion.
I'm not sure we will agree, even if
we don't have to agree. It's
okay.
for the reader to decide, looking at both sides, where does truth stand.
No, and if I may ask, it's good to discuss ideas that are in the air now as opposed to citing literature that was written in the past as much as possible, because listeners who are not familiar with the literature. So, like, whatever was written, just express it, condense the key idea, and then we can debate that.
Dude, I love how Lex has to step in and be like, well, can you just, like, say what he wrote? Because nobody's not going to know what the fuck you're talking about. Yeah, dude.
Ideas.
There are two aspects. There's a public debate, but there's also written words.
Yes, I'm just telling you that you, as an academic historian, put a lot of value in the written word, and I think it is valuable. But in this
He's incidentally not the only historian who puts value to words. Yes. I also do, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
just so we
more than just one or two sentences at a time.
But in this context, just for the education.
Forgot you guys are high schoolers. Yeah. Well, technically, I'm graduated now, so.
Well,
for
the
There's that.
educational purpose
Because I graduated a whole semester early.
is, why would people commit what I have to acknowledge, because I am faithful to the facts, massive atrocities on October 7th? Why did that happen? And I think that's the problem. The past is erased, and we suddenly went from 1948 to October 7th, 2023. And there's a problem there.
Oh my
So
god.
first of all, you have complete freedom to backtrack, and we'll go there with you. Obviously, we can't cover every single year, every single event, but there's probably critical moments in time.
Can I respond to something relating to the Lebanon War? I looked at the book that he got this from, what the quote was
Oh
from.
god damn it. Oops.
Um,
Oh, he looked up the book in real time. Oh no, let's see how bad Norm misrepresented this quote.
It sounds cold to say it, but war is tragic and civilians die. There is no war that this has not happened in the history of all of humankind. The statement that Israel might take care not to target civilians is not incompatible with a diary entry from someone who said they saw civilians getting killed. I think that sometimes we do a lot of weird games when we talk about international humanitarian law or laws that govern conflict, where we say things like civilians dying is a war crime, or civilian homes or hospitals getting destroyed is necessarily a war crime, or is necessarily somebody intentionally targeting civilians without making distinctions between military targets or civilian ones. I think that when we analyze different attacks, or when we talk about the conduct of the military, I think it's important to understand, like prospectively from the unit
Oh fuck, I can't heal.
of analysis of the actual military committing the acts, what's happening and what are the decisions being made, rather than just saying retrospectively, oh, well, a lot of civilians died, not very many, military people died, comparatively speaking, so it must have been war crimes, especially when you've got another side, I'll fast forward to Hamas, that intentionally attempts to induce those same civilian numbers, because Hamas is guilty of any war crime that you would potentially accuse, and this is according to Amnesty International, people that Norm loves to cite. Hamas is guilty of all of these same war crimes, of them failing to take care of the civilian population, of them essentially utilizing human shields to try to fire rockets free from attack. Essentially, yes. I'm just saying that essentially, as in terms of how international law defines it, not how Amnesty International defines it, but Amnesty International.
Did you say you're a high schooler before? What do you mean? I'm pretty sure I'm said I'm 18. But technically, like I said, I am graduated. Like I was just.
Describes times of human shielding, but they don't actually apply the correct international legal
You don't
standard.
know what's the correct
I know absolutely.
international law. You
No,
haven't
Norm,
the
I
clue.
absolutely.
You
do,
haven't
Norm.
the clue.
I absolutely.
I
do.
think you
but
can't
I'm
find
just
it on
saying.
Wikipedia.
I'm just
You
saying.
can't find
Believe it
it
or not,
on
Norm, the
Wikipedia.
entire Geneva Convention is all on Wikipedia. It's a wonderful
Okay, well,
website.
you know what-
But I'm just saying that on the Hamas side, there's an attempt to induce this type of military activity, attempt to induce civilian harm. That it's not just enough to say like, well, here's a diary entry where a guy talks about how tragic
See, I
these
think the
attacks are.
problem. I think the problem with your statement is that if you go back and listen to it, the first
Jesus.
part of it is war is hell, civilians die. It's a fact of life, and you state that in a very factual manner. Then when you start talking about Hamas, all of a sudden you've discovered morality, and you've discovered condemnation.
Oh my god. He actually can't do like the simplest immoral analysis is, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, he can't understand, his brain is so broken, his brain is so fucked, oh my god, that was the dumbest statement I've ever heard, oh my god. Intentions matter, Jesus, Destiny literally just talked about how intentions matter and how he just said there's evidence that Hamas is intentionally trying to inflict this type of damage, whereas with Israel it's incidental. Obviously the civilians are going to die either way because it's war and it's tragic and it's bad and we should try to reduce it, but there's evidence that Israel tries to reduce it whereas Hamas tries to maximize it. Oh my god, what is he, oh my god.
Nation, and you've discovered intent, and you are.
Oh my god, I'm gonna kill myself.
Unfortunately, far from alone in this. I'll give you. You know who for me is a perfect example.
Well, wait, hold on. Just in response, we don't need examples.
No,
the
go ahead.
false equivalency of the two sides is astounding. When Hamas kills civilians in a surprise attack on October 7th, this isn't because they are attempting to target military targets and they happen to stumble into a giant festival of people that.
Well, they did happen to stumble into it.
They did, but
And they killed 300
yeah,
people.
but they did. But when they
Yes.
stumbled into it, it wasn't an issue of trying to figure out a military target or not. They weren't failing a distinction. There wasn't a proportionality assessment done. It was just to kill civilians. Even the Amnesty International in 2008 and in 2014 and even today will
Look, I
continue
don't
to say
think
that
there's.
it's like
I
the
don't think
types
you'll
of attacks.
find anyone who will deny that Hamas has targeted civilians.
Sure.
You gave the example
But there's a
of,
difference because
of suicide bombings during the Second Intifada. I mean, facts are facts.
Sure, but I'm just saying that the Hamas targeting of civilians is different than the incidental loss of life that occurs when
Oh, it's
Israel
incidental
does.
loss
How
of life.
genocide is the intentional
Incidental
mass
loss of
murder.
life.
Genocide is an entirely separate claim.
Yeah,
right?
but the idea that Israel is not in the business of intentionally targeting civilians, I know that's what we're supposed to believe, but the historical record stands
No, that's
No,
very
it doesn't.
clearly.
I don't believe it does.
You've written about
Well,
it
when you say
yourself.
historical, do you mean like in the 40s to the 60s, or do you mean like
I
over
would
the past
say
like
the-
last like
from-
Yeah, I don't
30s of-
understand. Like, why would he go back to the historical record? Because it's probably true. Like, I don't like. I don't know, it's a history of like every fucking army probably targeting civilians at some point. Like, I don't understand. Like, it doesn't just focus on what they're doing now.
The last century to the 20s of this century. I just like to make, the way you characterize it. I think the best example of that I've come across during this specific conflict is John Kirby, the White House spokesman. I've named him Tears Testosterone for a very good reason. When he's talking about Palestinian civilian deaths, war is hell, it's a fact of life, get used to it. When he was confronted with Israeli civilian deaths on October 7th, he literally broke down in tears.
Understood that one is.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! They can't do basic moral analyses. Oh my god! They just keep trying to draw equivalencies. Oh my god! Their brain is so fucked. 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 Their brain is so fucked.
One isn't. He understood that.
No, that's what he tried
Destiny L? No, this is like the biggest Destiny W ever. It's not even a Destiny W. It's just this guy. It's just the other guy L, because he like actually can't do a basic like moral. He doesn't understand intent. He doesn't understand the difference between like proportionality and distinction and like all the fucking shit we read with that one.
No, he was speaking facts. The Hamas
Oh
guys
my
who
god!
attacked the kibbutzim,
Oh my god! You're
apart from
coping?
that-
What do you mean? I'm coping. I'm not coping here. I think like there are like times in here where like they have made good points, but this is just insane. This is just insane. You're spiraling. Yeah, I am spiraling because he like can't understand basic intent. Moral analysis.
attacks on the military sites. When they attacked the kibbutzim, were out to kill civilians, and they killed family after family, house after house. The Israeli attacks on Hamas installations
better.
and
You
fire.
know
You don't
better.
know better. No, you don't know Israeli pilots. That's the problem.
Thank God.
You don't know
I
Israeli
know, thank
pilots.
God.
They believe that they are killing Hamasniks. They're given certain
sure they believe it.
objectives, and
I'm
that's
sure
what they
they believe
attack.
it.
And if the
I'm
Hamas
sure
is
they believe
hiding
it.
behind
I'm sure they
civilians,
believe
civilians
every
die.
time they
It's as
target,
simple as
every
that.
time they target a kid, I'm sure they believe it's Hamas. When they kid, when they.
Stop saying target. Oh my god. There's a difference between target and killing. Oh my god. I'm gonna.
They believe
Yeah,
they
I
were
know they believed it.
Hamasniks.
Even though they were
You know that,
diminutive
but they-
size.
you know
Even
that-
though they were
Nah, from
diminutive
that angle, you don't see the size.
No, they saw
You
it.
don't see the size.
Let's see the size.
Oh, I know what he's quoting from, but you've lied about this particular
yeah.
instance in the past. Those kids weren't just on the beaches as opposite articles. Those kids were literally coming out of a previously identified Hamas compound.
I'm with Norm. How can you be with Norm here? Norm is you're fucking lying here.
Operated problem. They literally
Mr.
said you could Google it. You could
Mr.
Google
Borelli,
it.
with all
Mr.
due
Finkelstein.
respect, you're such a fantastic moron. It's terrifying.
Can you tell him to keep it down? I'm doing calc.
That wharf was filled with journalists. There were tens, scores of
Norm is owning little bro. Norm is like literally. He can't do a basic moral analysis right now. Like, I don't understand. Like, there were like some points that Norm brought up when they were talking about the history in 1948 that I thought were like okay points, but this is just, he just can't understand the difference between like intentionally targeting people and incidental deaths, and I don't get it.
journalists. That was an old fisherman's shack. What are you talking about? It's so painful.
Hamas naval-
It's so painful to.
Just ask the question, what did Israel think it was doing when it killed those kids? Israel thought that it was blowing up terrorists. Intentions matter when it comes to the moral standing of the perpetrators. Like, I don't...
Listen to this idiocy.
And to be clear, on the other side,
let's-
you're implying that a
okay,
strike was okayed on the Israeli
okay.
side, where they said, we're just
I
going to kill
said-
Israel lying like usual? What do you mean lying?
4 Palestinian children today for no reason.
Do you believe that?
Do you believe that? Do you believe that?
let's-
Right,
okay,
you said
do
right,
you
there was a
believe-
hotel of
okay,
journalists. Do you
here-
think that they
here we
were
go.
out to kill
Here we
four
go.
children?
Here we go.
You will never answer that.
I will answer the question.
Pilots were out to
I will
kill
even
4
answer
children.
And it was a
morons.
They're liars. I'm sure Israel has lied before, but like, I don't, their actions don't make sense if they're intentionally like targeting civilians, because they literally call residents and tell them to evacuate. They drop leaflets. They run their phone banks. I already said they call civilians, tell them to leave, and they like, I don't understand. Can you tell them to keep it down? I'm doing coke based. I just don't like. They warned all of northern Gaza to evacuate. They declare safe zones. They open up humanitarian corridors. Like, it seems like they try to do a lot of things to minimize civilian casualties. Like, I don't
That was a
understand.
strike. That was a drone strike. So it was approved all the way up the chain that we're going to kill children today. We're going to kill Palestinian
You want me
children
to
today.
answer, or do you want your motor mouth to go? Okay, answer. In 2018, there was the Great March of Return in Gaza.
That was a completely different attack, man. I don't know, like, why the hell you're pivoting to that. He's gonna say the Great March to Return in Gaza. He's gonna mention like the UN report. Oh, 200 Palestinian civilians were killed for no good reason. That's true. And when we see those things, we should look at that and like we should ask questions. But it's just, oh my god, check out the streamer Nick Fuentes. Oh my god, bro. Oh my god, what the fuck, dude? It's so fucked. Like, I think when Israel does things like that, like, you should look at that and, like, ask questions. It's fair to ask questions, but, like, it looks like the reason that, they did that was, like, as a poor training. Like, it wasn't, I don't know. It just doesn't.
By all reckonings of human rights organizations and journalists who were there, it was overwhelmingly nonviolent. It
organized by the Hamas.
With whoever organized
okay. When he says overwhelmingly nonviolent, there were certain protests in that whole movement that were nonviolent. Dude, I keep dying because I'm not even paying attention to the game. There were certain, like, protests that were nonviolent the whole time, but, God, literally, people had, I think they had Molotov cocktails and they had the incendiary balloons that they would try to, have like explosives attached to balloons that they would launch into Israel. Yeah, Jesus, I don't.
It's by Satan. Let's start.
Satan,
with
yeah.
Hamas.
Okay,
No,
Satan.
yeah.
I agree. Let's go for the big one, the big Megillah. It's Satan. Okay, overwhelmingly organized, overwhelmingly nonviolent. Resembled at the beginning the first
bombs here and there,
first Intifada.
they threw
Represent the
bombs here and
first.
there,
Yeah, okay, not bombs. But
They
let's
tried to make
okay.
holes in the fence,
Okay,
obviously.
Let's continue.
Yeah.
So.
But I'm not sure Israel behaved morally in that
Okay,
respect.
okay.
No,
Okay, wait.
I'm willing to grant you that.
Please.
I'm willing to
Allow
grant
me,
you.
allow me to.
You don't have to pursue
allow
it,
me.
'cause I'm willing to grant
allow me to finish.
I don't know anything about this.
Oh my
Okay.
God.
So, as you know, along the Gaza perimeter, there was Israel's best trained snipers, correct?
I don't know best trained. They were
But-
snipers.
Fine.
Snipers.
Okay. All right.
They're
Because
editorializing
hey,
forward.
laugh! It's hilarious. The story's so funny.
You're lying about
It's
the Great
so
March of Return
funny.
had aspects of
Okay,
violence to it.
okay,
According, even the UN says it themselves.
Okay.
But you only
Even the UN said when they did their investigation, I think that said that they even during the like the 200 that they didn't have a right to kill. I think they even said that one person, they had a reasonable. They were reasonable in shooting that person because he did actually pose a threat. Like I don't.
What the UN says that you like.
See, the problem, Mr. Morelli, is you don't know the English language. You don't
I can read
understand-
from the
Did you
UN
hear-
website
did
itself.
I
In regards
say-
to the Great March of Return,
Please
they said,
stop with your
while the
idiotic-
vast majority of
with your
protesters.
idiotic-
So Norma's allowed to quote whatever he wants, but as soon as Destiny quotes something,
acted in a peaceful manner.
No, listen to
During
what he's
most
saying.
protests,
Did-
dozens have
did you
approached the
just
fence,
agree with me,
attempting to
Mr.
damage it,
Did the
burning
wall-
tires,
did I
throwing
say
stones and
overwhelmingly
Molotov cocktails
nonviolent?
towards Israeli forces,
Okay.
flying incendiary
Okay,
kites and balloons
okay.
into Israeli territory. The latter resulted
Yeah,
in
but-
extensive
but you
damage to
don't-
agricultural land and
okay.
nature reserves inside
Okay.
Israel and risked the lives
Yeah,
of Israeli
because
civilians.
Mr.
Some incidents of
Mr.
shooting and
Borelli-
throwing of explosives
Yeah,
were also
talk
reported.
fast.
I'm
So
just
people
trying to-
think that you're coherent.
I'm just reading from the
Okay.
UN.
Yeah, but you
I
see,
know you like them
got,
sometimes,
you got
only
the
when they
month-
agree with you,
You
though.
got the months wrong. You got the months wrong. We're talking about the beginning in March 30th, 2018.
You just described that march as mostly
Okay,
peaceful.
allow me.
this is about to definitely yeah. It's I think Destiny said like after he did it, like he tried to be respectful for a while, and then I think he said like they took a break, and Benny Morris, this guy, his partner, said like, "Hey, I'm gonna head to bed. Y'all have a good one." Yeah, thanks, Ophelia. Well, I'm in your Discord server now, so. Religion. Oh no. Wait, where's the news? You lied. There's not even a news channel here. What the freak?
Finish. So there were the snipers, okay? Now you find it so far-fetched. Israelis purposely, deliberately
hidden.
targeting civilians? That's such a far-fetched idea. An overwhelmingly non-violent march. What did the international
It wasn't a
investigation?
march, it was a campaign
Yeah,
which
whatever
went
you
on
want to
for-
call
for
it.
months.
Whatever you want to call
For
it.
months.
Yeah. What did the UN investigation find?
Well, he just read it. to you.
I read the report. I don't read things off of those machines. I read the report. What did it find?
I don't read things off of those machines.
Brace yourself. You thought it was so funny, the idea of IDF targeting civilians.
Oh my
It
God.
found, go look this up on your machine.
I already know what you're going to say. You're
It
going to say you found that
targeted
only one or
children,
two of them were
targeted
justified
children,
killings.
targeted journalists, targeted medics, and here's the funniest one of all. It's so hilarious. They targeted disabled people who were 300 meters away from the fence and just standing by
God.
trees.
If it's true, if what you're
If
saying
it's
is
true,
if what you're
By the
saying
way,
is true,
just quick pause. I think everything was fascinating to listen to, except the mention of hilarious. Nobody finds any of this hilarious. And if any of us are laughing, it's not at the suffering of civilians or suffering of anyone. It's at the obvious joyful camaraderie in the room. So I'm enjoying it, and also the joy of learning. So thank you.
Can we talk about the targeting civilian thing a little bit? I think there's like an important
great
underlying,
question, yeah.
not necessarily that. I think it's important to understand. Yeah, I think it's important to understand. There's like 3 different things here that we need to think about. So one is a policy of killing civilians. So I would ask the other side. I'm going to ask all 3 because I know there won't be a short answer. Do you think there is a policy top down from the IDF to target civilians? That's one thing. A second thing is
He said yes.
When yeah, sure, okay,
No,
yeah, that's fine.
no,
Okay,
you answered
but
it.
then the second thing is, or there's 2 distinctions I want to draw between. I think Benny would say this. I would say this. I'm sure undoubtedly there have been cases where IDF soldiers, for no good reason, have targeted and killed Palestinians that they should not have done, that would be prosecutable as war crimes as defined by
and
the Rome
some,
Statute and
and some
ICC.
have been prosecuted.
Yeah, and I'm
According to
absolutely
you
sure.
and
Hold
your
on, wait,
book,
wait,
practically none.
I'm sure
According to
that
you and your book,
I'm sure
Oh
that
my
they would all
God.
wait for soldiers that happened. But I think that it's important. I think that it's important that when we talk about military strikes, when we talk about things especially involving bombings or drone attacks, these are things that are signed off by multiple different layers of command, by multiple people involved in an operation, including intelligence gathering, including weaponeering, and there also have typically lawyers involved. When you make the claim that an IDF soldier shot a Palestinian, those 3 people, the 3 hostages that came up with white flags, and something horrible happened, I think that's a fair statement to make, and I think a lot of criticism is deserved. But when you make the statement that 4 children were killed by a strike, the claim that you're making,
Deliberately,
the
yes.
claim that you're making is
my
that
God.
multiple levels of the IDF signed off on just killing.
I have no idea what
That's great.
motivated
If you don't
them.
understand the process, then let me
Well,
educate
you
you. I
don't
can tell you. I
understand
do
the
understand the
process.
process. I'm telling you. I'm
You're
trying to explain
really-
you right
you're
now.
the IDF.
Yes.
You're
Basic
studying
military.
the
You can ask
IDF.
anybody that's
Aside
talked
from
about.
Wikipedia,
You
can you
yes,
tell
you
me
can
what
talk
your
to people.
knowledge
You
of
can
the
talk
IDF
to
is?
people who
Apart from
work in the
Wikipedia,
military.
What's your knowledge of the
You know what?
IDF?
Audience can look this up. Do you think that bombing and strikes are decided by one person in the field? Do you think one person
I
is in control
respond
of
to
an
that?
What he's
airplane or a
trying to
drone
tell you is
strike?
a pilot doesn't do it on
Yes,
his own.
strike
Can I
cells have
respond?
entire apparatuses
Fire.
that are designed to figure out how to strike and who to strike. So when you say that 4 children are targeted, you're saying that a whole apparatus is
You
trying
make
to
my
murder
argument better than
4
me.
Palestinian
You make
children,
my argument
which is
better
a
than me.
ridiculous argument.
Because, really, that it's impossible at the command level. It's impossible at
didn't
the
say
command
impossible.
level. But you said that they couldn't have done it at the bottom if it weren't also
You,
at
just
the
need to-
top.
you don't understand the
So-
strength of
I
the
don't
claim that you're
understand.
making. You're
With
saying
all
that
due
from a
respect,
top-down level, that
with all
lawyers,
due
multiple
respect,
commanders,
Mr.
all these people
Bernal,
signed
do
off
not tell me
on
what I don't
killing
understand.
4 Palestinians.
It's true.
Children.
It's true. I don't spend my nights on Wikipedia. I read books. I admit that as a single.
Waste of time.
Yeah,
Wasting time.
I know books are a waste of time. With all due regard,
Well,
there.
you are. The only thing you take from them are 2 or 3 quotes that you use.
I
Yeah.
completely respect the fact, and I'll say it on the air. As much as I find totally disgusting what's come of your politics, a lot of the books are excellent. And I'll even tell you, because I'm not afraid of saying it, whenever I have to check on a basic fact, the equivalent of going to the Britannica, I go to your books. I know you got a lot of the facts right.
Benny Moore's books
I
for
would
the
never
listeners.
I would never say books are a waste of time. And it's regrettable to you that you got strapped with a partner
never said
who thinks
books
that
are a
all
waste
the
of
wisdom,
time.
all
Open
the
your books,
wisdom.
Mark.
He didn't say they're a waste of time.
I'd like to respond to what you were saying. I think the question that we're trying to answer,
I think you don't understand Israel, you know.
let me finish,
really
please.
understands Israel.
I think we're
how
all
it works.
I think we're all agreed
Yeah.
that Palestinians have deliberately targeted civilians, whether we're talking about Hamas and Islamic Jihad today or
I prefer the word-
previously.
I prefer the word murdered and raped rather than targeted. Targeted is too soft
I'll use
for what the
targeted.
Hamas did.
I'm okay with
I'm not talking about.
I'm talking about this now.
Yeah, but I'm trying to answer his question.
Yeah, yeah.
Historically, there is substantial evidence that Palestinians have targeted civilians. Whether it's been incidental or systematic is a different discussion. I don't want to get into that now. For some reason, there seems to be a huge debate about whether any Israeli has ever sunk so low as to target
why
a
can't I
civilian.
heal?
No, we've agreed. Both
We
said
just
that.
agreed
We've
that
just
we
said
conceded
that
that
this
we're
has
gonna
happened here.
Okay, and I think
We've agreed on
okay,
that.
I think
What we're saying is it's not policy, which is what you guys are
Okay.
implying, that they kill civilians deliberately.
if I understand you correctly, you're basically making the claim that none of these attacks could have happened without going through an entire chain of
For
command.
strike cells that are involved in like drone attacks or plane attacks
yes.
or yes.
My understanding of the Israeli military, and you could perhaps you've served in it, you would know better. It's actually a fairly chaotic organization.
No, that's not true. Especially not the Air Force.
I don't know. We read that one thing. How Israel makes its targeting decisions. It's just like they literally for a lot of operations like drone strikes, they literally like consult lawyers. They had the MAG and the MAG, I think, is an organization in Israel that IDF's MAG Corps is an exceptionally competent group of advisors on the law of armed conflict. Yeah, I forget what this stands for, but this is like literally the IDF. This is like the IDF's fucking lawyer division. Military Advocate General. Responsible for implementing the rule of law in the IDF. Yeah, like I don't understand. Like before they do strikes, they fucking call the lawyers, and then there's another international group. Shit. I think there's another group that like Israel will consult sometimes. That's not based in Israel, but it's like an international group. Yeah.
Extremely organized. The Air Force works in a very organized fashion, as he says, with lawyers, chain of command, and ultimately the pilot drops the bomb where he's told to drop it.
In Protective Edge, was that 200 strikes in like 60 seconds, I think? I think at the opening of Protective Edge? Like, the coordination between...
You're talking about 2008.
I think Protective Edge was 2014. But I'm just saying that the coordination in the military is pretty tight.
My understanding of the Israeli military is that it's quite chaotic, and there's also a lot of testimonies from Israel. But be that as it may, okay, I'm prepared to accept both of your contentions that it's a highly organized and disciplined force. Air Force, under any scenario, is going to be more organized than the other branches. And you're saying such a strike would have been inconceivable.
I'm not necessarily saying inconceivable. I'm just saying that like that would have required
you're basically
murderous intent for so many
yes,
people. I don't think good evidence has been presented to say that that's...
Your basic claim is that it would be fair to assume that such a strike could have only been carried out with multiple levels of authorization and signing off. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's accept that.
That's how drone strikes work, yeah.
We have now seen incident after incident after incident after incident where entire families are vaporized in single strikes.
Who is in the families? Who lives in the house?
Family
inside?
members.
No,
family
or next
members.
to the house
Family
in which
members.
these families are
We
killed.
have seen incident after...
Do you know that Hamasniks weren't in that house? Do you know that their ammunition dumps weren't
Why
in
do I
those
have
houses?
to prove a negative?
You're saying that they deliberately targeted families. If Israel wanted to kill civilians in Gaza, they could have killed 500,000 by now with the number of strikes they've done.
And therefore,
the fact that they've only killed a certain small number...
30,000 is a small number.
Small number in
We
proportion.
consider 30,000 a small number.
In proportion over 4 months probably is an indication that it's targeted and that there are Hamas targets in these places.
So I've given
12,000 children is only, and if that's the case, why is it? Yeah, you said only. No, Professor Morris, here's a question for you. If we take every combat zone in the world for the past 3 years, every combat zone in the world.
In Vietnam, the Americans killed
I said,
a million people.
I'm not talking about Vietnam.
They killed 40 million.
I was in the anti-war movement. So don't strap me.
Killed a million people in Vietnam.
Fine. And 30 million Russians were killed. So during World War II, so everything else is irrelevant. Okay. Here's a question. Professor Morris, here's a question. It's very perplexing. If you take every combat zone in the world for the past 3 years, and you multiply the number of children killed by 4, every combat zone in the world.
Oh my God, who cares? Intentions matter. That's the whole point of what you're talking about right now, dude.
You get gossip. To even make it to plausible.
That is not true. That is not what plausible means. It is absolutely not. You're dead wrong.
Mr. Borelli, please don't teach me about the English language.
So the Declaration of Judge
I said plausibility is the same concept as qualifying.
The court is not asked at this present phase of the proceedings to determine whether South Africa's allegations of genocide are well-founded. They're not well-founded. They're not even well-founded. The court isn't. You said that plausible is a high standard. It is absolutely not. It is a misrepresentation of the strength of the case against Israel, just like the majority of the quotes they have in this case are. And also, you said it was an extremely well-founded case. They spend like 1/4 of all of the quotations, some even pulled from the Goldstone report, that try to that actually deal with the intent part. Which is, by the way, I think you guys, I don't know if you use the phrase the dolo specialis, that the intentional part of genocide.
I don't know that term.
I think it's called dolo specialis. It is the most important part of genocide, which is proving the special. It is a highly special intent to commit genocide. It's possible that Israel could.
That's mens rea.
No,
They should prove
the
it.
mens
That's
rea.
a mistake.
Yes, I understand the state of mind. But
Mens
if it's
rea is
genocide,
wrongdoing
dolo
the-
specialis.
Oh my god. Genocide has two components. It has the physical component and it has the volitional component. The volitional component of a crime is the mental state of the crime, right? And it's the volitional component has different standards for different crimes, just like a physical component of a crime sort of like determines how severe the crime is. Like there's different like levels of assault and stuff. The like volitional component determines how severe the crime is. So genocide is like the highest crime, right? So it requires a really high volitional component. It has to be dolus specialis, special intent to commit genocide, to deliberately kill civilians with the goal of destroying them in whole or in part.
It's a highly special intent. Did you read the case? It is
Mr.
a highly
Pirelli,
special intent.
I'm going to
convicted
ask you
of
again.
genocide. Yes.
Please stop displaying your imbecility.
Okay, I'm sorry if you think the declaration of the judge is
Don't put on public display that you're a moron. At least have the self-possession to shut up. Did I
I'm
read the
comfortable putting
case?
my display on camera.
Mr.
You're comfortable
Pirelli,
putting yours in
Mr.
books,
Pirelli,
okay?
I read the case around 4 times. I read all of the majority opinion, the declarations. I read Aaron Barak's declaration.
Then why are you lying and saying plausible high standard?
Because I said, even reaching the benchmark of plausibility is a very high standard in the world. It's the equivalent of a regional player qualifying for an Olympics. It's still 2 steps removed. You may not be on the team, and you may not get a medal, but to get...
Would you rather Stephen Bannon / Noam Chomsky be president, or I don't know, or Joe Rogan, David Duke? That's hard. I don't know, man. I don't care. I don't care.
Get qualified, which in this context is the equivalent of plausible. You must be doing
I don't
something.
know. I'm probably going to align with Noam Chomsky relatively closely on most things in terms of policy. So
That's what the court will rule. Remember what I just told you. The court will
I don't
rule
expect
there
to
was
be
no
even
genocide.
around when the court reaches its final decision.
Why?
Why? They'll take a long, long time.
2 years, 3
No, I don't think they'll take 2 or 3 years.
I mean,
but-
Bosnia, which was admittedly a special type of case because they were accusing Serbia of sponsoring the Bosnian Serbs. That took, I think, 17 years from 90.
I assume they'll take 2 or 3 years.
But the point you're making, so
I'm
this is
saying
illegal.
that something horrible must be happening to even achieve.
It's horrible. It's a war.
Yeah,
It's true,
It's
yes.
horrible.
But I
Except
think-
they weren't rendering a ruling on a war. They were rendering a ruling on a genocide.
And I think the
do.
And they
suggestion.
said it was
just said
plausible. They also
we're
said it was
talking about
plausible
it.
that Israel is committing a
But
military operation as well.
Yeah, but I think the problem with your characterization is you're saying in so many words the South Africans basically only have to show up in court with a coherent
Right.
statement.
Right.
That is correct.
In
They
today's
needed-
atmosphere, that's probably correct.
They needed to do a lot more.
Not
They
much more.
needed
Not
to
much more.
they needed
The
to
American
persuade.
judge?
Today's atmosphere.
The
forget
American
America.
judge?
They
Today's
needed to
atmosphere,
persuade.
Judges go according to what the majority want to hear.
Yeah, but they
He was
needed-
the president.
They needed to persuade the court that it was worth investing several years of their time
Damn it.
in
They're probably
hearing
well
this
paid
case.
for it,
To
so they-
they're well paid whether
they
they
have
take
time.
this case or not. I mean, you know, they have a full docket whether they accept or reject this case. And I don't think we should.
Remember what I just said. They won't rule there was genocide. Remember what I said.
Also, I recommend people actually read the case and follow through a lot of the quotes. That they just
Okay.
don't show
Okay,
genocidal
Mr. Borelli,
intent.
brace
I don't think so
yourself.
either.
The Israeli Minister of
Mr.
Finance on the
Pirelli.
8th of October 2023, this is taken from the ICJ, this is from South African submission, Bezalel Smotrich, I can't read this, stated,
Smotrich.
there you go, okay, at a meeting of the Israeli cabinet that, quote, we need to deal a blow that hasn't been seen in 50 years and take down Gaza, end quote. But again, if you click through and you read the source, their own linked source, it says, as per this own source, quote, the powerful finance minister, settler leader Bezalel Smotrich, I can't pronounce this, demanded at the cabinet meeting late Saturday that the army, quote, hit Hamas brutally and not take the matter of the captives into significant consideration, end quote. Quote, in war as in war, you have to be brutal, end quote. He was quoted as saying, quote, we need to deal a blow that hasn't been seen in 50 years and take down Gaza, end quote. You can't strip.
What do I think of the
quotation
debate so far? I mean, I don't know. It's really hard to summarize. I think Norm is insane. I don't know. I think Benny maybe isn't doing as good a job as he could be, just because I don't know. I see like sometimes it seems like it's like his statements seem biased. Now, like obviously, like I think he has a real position, and I think he advocates for that real position, like effectively. But like, I don't know. It like you can, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Some of Benny's statements seem that they're like biased, but that's like my only criticism of like the pro-Israeli side. The other side is insane and can't do. Like Finkelstein and the other guy, Rabbani, dude, Rabbani could not do a basic like moral analysis of like intent. Like I don't.
I think take down Gaza.
That's not genocide.
Hey,
So when the Ukrainians say we need to defeat Russia,
that's not genocide.
no. When Ukraine says we need to defeat Russia, is that genocidal? Do they mean killing all Russian citizens?
Professor Mars, here's another one. When the defense, ridiculous.
Yes, ridiculous.
The American judge.
He also doesn't determine policy.
The American judge read.
You are holding the American judge to,
Well, she was the president.
Because he'll appeal to authority when it agrees with him, and we won't deal with the actual facts of the matter. Ever.
Okay. The American judge read several of the quotes.
Look at the American Supreme Court today. They may support Trump.
Okay,
Shows you how worthy American judges are.
Professor Mars, without going too far afield, if you heard a statement by the defense minister said, "We are going to prevent any food, water, fuel, or electricity from entering Gaza."
Did Israel do that?
Okay, no, I'm wondering.
What he said.
I'm asking you.
Isn't Israeli government policy?
But we're talking about statements now, intent. How would you interpret that?
After 1,200 of your citizens are murdered the way they were, I would expect extreme statements by lots of politicians.
By lots of politicians. But you don't accept extreme
Palestinians. But that's not Israeli policy.
Wait, but you don't accept.
What he said isn't Israeli policy.
But you don't.
They let in water. They let in gas.
But you don't accept extreme Palestinian statements after they lost their entire country, not just 1,200 people.
That's a good point. No, it's a good point.
And on that, on that brief moment of agreement, let's just take a quick pause. We need a smoke break, we need a water break, we need a bathroom break.
Take down Gaza is not a genocide.
I don't know what it
Russia
means.
is a genocide
What does
statement.
take down Gaza
When we went to war with Iraq and we wanted to destroy Iraq, that was a genocidal statement. There's a reason why genocide is such an importantly guarded concept, and it's not to condemn every nation that goes to war. Wait, you do know how to pronounce my name. Are you mispronouncing it intentionally?
Yeah, he made you into an Italian all the time.
By your solicitude for international law.
You should try learning it sometime. It would help you sort out a lot of the civilian deaths.
Unfortunately, 15 judges disagree.
You could keep citing the judges. You should actually try reading the actual statements.
This is tiring. You've invited us to a tiring session.
Yeah, there you go. How are you guys doing?
Okay. There are major.
Do they keep the entire break in here?
Court is doing the judge in 2 years' time.
Yes. Okay. So what you just said is one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about this particular conflict is because there are really important things to discuss, but they will never be discussed.
They're not being
We're not going to talk
discussed
about area A, B, and C, or what a transference of territory. Instead, we're going to talk about apartheid. We're not going to talk about the differences in how do you conduct war in an urban environment. We're just going to talk about genocide. We're not going to talk about what's a good solution.
I think I keep. I listened to this whole debate, and the pro-Palestinian side is really something. Yeah, I mean, you're obviously biased, Kopanak. I mean, so am I. It doesn't matter at this point. But yeah, you're right. There is fucking insane. I think they keep most of it. Yeah, that is. I think what they're what they're saying right now is a good point. Like, it's so frustrating to me, okay, as a bleeding heart liberal, okay, is that like we can't talk about like the cost of war. Like, it has to be like genocide. Like, I think it's really good. Like, in a world without Twitter and TikTok, in a world where everyone didn't have a cell phone and is able to post pictures of starving children in Gaza, in that world, I don't think we would be airdropping food into Gaza. And I think it's good we're airdropping food into Gaza. I think it's good that we're trying to minimize the cost of war in Gaza, but we can never talk about minimizing the cost of war because it has to always be represented as apartheid, genocide, open air prison, concentration camp. It's just such a shame that we can't actually talk about the cost of war and how to minimize it. Because I think it's really good that in modern society, we have the tools to make things just publicly known and stuff. It's really good that people in the U.S. know what's happening in Palestine right now and are willing and see. I think it's really good that there's images of malnourished children that get circulated. And then it's oh fuck, this child is dying, we should do something. I think that's really good, but it's just constantly misrepresented as genocide, and it's just super fucking frustrating. Okay, dude, but even Rabbani saying Israel needs to be dismantled and won't say well, I think Rabbani I think Rabbani technically said the majority were from Hamas. But yeah,
Possible to talk, be productive.
obviously Finkelstein is his own thing. I don't know.
Solutions.
Finkelstein
I
is
have no
wild.
idea what to say. I mean, I don't see any solutions. And if you wanted a positive end to this discussion, which is what you said at the beginning, I can't contribute to that because I'm pessimistic. I don't see any way forward here.
But the lack of the solution is easy. The reason why the solution is hard is because the histories and the myths are completely. There's a different factual record, right?
One of the things it would be good to talk about solutions with the future is going back in all the times it has failed. So every time.
But even at that, we're probably not going to agree. He's going to say, you can write that, I can predict the whole line. He's going to say from 93 to 99, he's going to say Israel didn't adhere to the Oslo Accords ever. Settlement expansion continued. Raids happened into the West Bank. That there was never a legitimate, that Netanyahu came in and violated the Y memorandum, the transference. He's going to say all of this, and he's not going to bring up anything on the Palestinian side. And then for Camp David, he's going to say that, that Arafat was trying, that the maps and the territorial exchange wasn't good enough, that they were asking Palestinians to make all the concessions, that Israel would have,
But even worse, it's still based, and even more true than Destiny. At the end, he's saying international law doesn't matter, which is true. I don't think that's true. I think I don't know. I would probably side more with Destiny on that. We've had our international law discussion before.
Future book should interest you guys.
Oh, what are you working on?
No, not working on. It's actually going to come out. It deals with Israeli and Arab atrocities, war crimes, I call them, in the 48 war. That's
really?
Book, yeah. Just deals with that subject.
Is this because I know you've also talked about the closure of the archives and stuff?
Well, it's marginal. They do it deals with that as well, but they have tried to seal off documents which had already used and seen.
So
now they don't let people see them. That's happened, but it's marginal in terms of its effect on.
Were the British archives useful for you for this new book?
Well, for this less, it's mostly Israeli archives. The British and the Americans and the UN did deal with these subjects.
Well, in relation to international law mattering for a peace settlement, because the West Bank settlements are illegal under international law. But that means what? Wait, I'm sorry. Am I misinterpreting what you're saying? Well, it was in relation to international law mattering for peace settlement, because the West Bank settlements are illegal under international law. Oh, okay. I mean, that makes sense then. Yeah.
It's about 100. I think there's agreement on that by Israelis and Arabs. 100, 105.
Because before they
used to say 245 or 254. Those were the figures the British and the Arabs and the Haganah agreed on at the beginning.
Because the Red Cross.
Same way Russia took control of Crimea. Yeah.
I don't remember. Maybe it was what's his name, Jacques de Reynier. Maybe. Maybe he came up with that number. But it was just he didn't count. They didn't count bodies. They just threw the number out, and everybody was happy to blame the Irgun and the Lehi for killing more Arabs than actually.
Well, and they put it to good use as well.
Well, they said that it helped precipitate more evacuations. They also used that number. Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for that heated discussion about the present. I would love to go back into history in a way that informs what we can look for by way of hope for the future. So when has, in Israel and Palestine, have we been closest to something like a peace settlement? To something that, like, where both sides would be happy and enable the flourishing of both peoples?
Oh, damn it.
Well, from my knowledge of the 120 years or so of conflict, the closest I think the two sides have been to reaching some sort of settlement appears to have been in the year 2000, when Barak and then subsequently Clinton offered a two-state settlement to PLO, Palestinian Authority chairman Yasser Arafat. And Arafat seemed to waver. He didn't immediately reject what was being offered, but ultimately came down at the end of Camp David in July 2000. He came down against the proposals, and Clinton, who said he wouldn't blame him, later blamed Arafat for bringing down the summit and not reaching a solution there. But I think they're on the table, certainly in the Clinton parameters of December 2000, which followed the proposals by Barak in July. The Palestinians were offered the best deal they're ever going to get from Israel, unless Israel is destroyed, and then there'll just be a Palestinian Arab state. But the best deal that Israel could ever offer them, they were offered, which essentially was 95% of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, half of the old city of Jerusalem, some sort of joint control of the Temple Mount, and the Gaza Strip, of course, in full. And the Palestinians said no to this deal. And nobody really knows why Arafat said no.
Bonnie says some funny stuff we've never heard, saying the best chance for peace was 73, was after 73 with a joint U.S.-Soviet enforced peace deal. I can maybe understand what he's getting at, because it's like, that was when Israel made peace with Egypt, right? Was after 73. So I can maybe understand, like, if he was thinking, if you're thinking like, well, if Israel was willing to make peace with Egypt at this time, maybe something could have been negotiated with the Palestinians, maybe.
But my
But
reading is
yeah,
that
I don't
he was
know. I don't think that would be the closest.
constitutionally, psychologically incapable of signing off on a two-state deal, meaning acceptance of the existence of a Jewish state. This was really the problem. And
Of Israel or of a Jewish state?
of a Jewish state, the Jewish state of Israel. He wasn't willing to share Palestine with the Jews and put his name to that. I think he just couldn't do it. That's my reading. But some people say it was because the terms were insufficient and he was willing, but was.
But who would
waiting for
Israel
slightly better
negotiate
terms.
with?
I don't.
That's a fair point. Well, did the PLO came about in the 60s, right? Yeah, the PLO came about in 64. So the PLO was there, right? So maybe they could have negotiated with the PLO. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't think that would have been the closest. Like, I understand, like, I don't know.
I don't buy
Maybe
that. I don't think so. But other people disagree with me on this.
maybe Israel
what
was
do you
more
think?
willing to make
Well,
concessions
just
back then.
briefly, in
peace?
response, Arafat formally recognized Israel in 1993.
Yeah, earlier.
I don't think actually that in 2000, 2001, a genuine resolution was on offer, because I think the maximum Israel was prepared to offer.
The PLO was
admittedly
essentially
more than it
Hamas
had
back
been prepared
then.
to offer in the
Would
past,
they? I
fell
mean,
short of the minimum.
yeah,
that
they were
the
obviously committing
Palestinians considered
terror
to be a
attacks, but
reasonable
like I don't.
two-state settlement, bearing in mind.
Like, yeah, I've talked about this. It
that
just kind of
as
sucks that Palestinians
1949,
don't have anyone negotiating for
Israel
them in good
controlled
faith. It
78%
seems
of
like.
the British Mandate of Palestine. The Palestinians were seeking a state on the remaining 22%, and this was apparently.
But the PLO,
too
this
much
is
for
just my understanding, which could be wrong. I thought the PLO, even back then, was like they did like bus bombings and stuff, right? But I don't think they ever. But I think it was like, but it was, I don't know, more political in nature than like genocidal in nature. I think Hamas is more genocidal in nature. I think the PLO tends to be more like, I mean, it's still terrorism, but like.
Israel. My response to your question would be
Wait, they were being offered something like 22 or 21%.
they were being offered, I think, less than a withdrawal to the 1967 borders with mutual and minor and reciprocal land swaps and a just resolution of
The refugee problem was one of the
question. Yes. I worked for a number of years with International Crisis Group, and my boss at the time was Rob Malley, who was one of the American officials present
who
at
was
Camp
recently
David.
thrown out of the State Department or whatever.
The point I want to make about Rob was he wrote, I think, a very perceptive article in 2001 in the New York Review of Books. I know that you and Ehud Barak have had a debate with him, but I think he gives a very compelling reason of why and how Camp David failed. But rather than going into that,
He wrote that together with Hussein Ara.
Hussein Ara, yes, who was not at Camp David.
Yes.
But in response to your question, I think there could have been a real possibility of Israeli-Palestinian and Arab-Israeli peace in the mid-1970s, in the wake of the 1973 October War. I'll recall that in 1971, Moshe Dayan, Israel's defense minister at the time, full of triumphalism about Israel's victory in 1967, speaking to a group of Israeli military veterans, stated, if I had to choose between Sharm el-Sheikh without peace or peace without Sharm el-Sheikh.
Yeah, I think it's just saying Israel's more willing to make concessions back then, which maybe is true.
Dayan said, I will choose for Sharm el-Sheikh without peace. Then the 1973 war came along, and I think Israeli calculations began to change very significantly. And I think it was in that context that had there been a joint U.S.-Soviet push for an Arab-Israeli and Israeli-Palestinian resolution that incorporated both an Israeli withdrawal to the 1967 lines and the establishment of a Palestinian state in the occupied territories, I think there was a very reasonable prospect for that being achieved. It ended up being aborted, I think, for several reasons, and ultimately the Egyptian president, Anwar Sadat, decided, for reasons we can discuss later, to launch a separate unilateral initiative for Israeli-Egyptian rather than Arab-Israeli peace. And I think once that's set in motion, the prospect disappeared because Israel essentially saw its most powerful adversary removed from the equation and felt that this would give it a free hand in the occupied territories, also in Lebanon, to get rid of the PLO and so on. So, you know, and you ask when were we closest, and I can't give you an answer of when we were closest. I can only tell you when I think we could have been close, and that was a lost opportunity. If we look at the situation today,
I can kind of understand what he's saying
about a two-state settlement. My own view, and I've written about this, I don't buy the arguments of the naysayers that we have passed the so-called point of no return with respect to a two-state settlement. Certainly, if you look at the Israeli position in the occupied territories, I would argue it's more tenuous than was the French position in Algeria in 1954, than was a British position in Ireland in 1916, than was the Ethiopian position in Eritrea in 1990. And so, as a matter of practicality, as a matter of principle, I do think the establishment of a Palestinian state in the occupied territories remains realistic. I think the question that we now need to ask ourselves, it's one I'm certainly asking myself, since October 7th, and looking at Israel's genocidal campaign, but also looking at larger questions. Is it desirable? Can you have peace with what increasingly appears to be an irrational, genocidal state that seeks to confront and resolve each and every political challenge with violence, and that reacts to its failure to achieve solutions to political challenges with violence by applying even more violence, that has an insatiable lust for Palestinian territory, that, you know, a genocidal apartheid state that seems increasingly incapable of even conceiving of peaceful coexistence with the other people on that land. So I'm very pessimistic that a solution is possible. I look at, I grew up in Western Europe in the long shadow of the Second World War. I think we can all agree that there could have been no peace in Europe had certain regimes on that continent not been removed from power. I look at Southeast Asia in the late 1970s, and I think we're all agreed that there could not have been peace in that region had the Khmer Rouge not been ousted. I look at Southern Africa during the 1990s, and I think we can all be agreed that had the white minority regimes of that ruled Zimbabwe and South Africa not been dismantled, there could not have been peace in that region. And although I think it's worth having a discussion, I do think it's now a legitimate question to ask, can there be peace without dismantling the Zionist regime? And I make a very clear distinction between these.
I thought he was gonna make a point I agree with and say, like, I don't know why I expected that out of him. I thought he was gonna say, like, oh, maybe there can't be peace without dismantling Hamas, but nope. Went straight for the okay.
I'm just saying that on the Hamas side, there's an attempt to induce this type of military activity, attempt to induce civilian harm. That it's not just enough to say, like, well, here's a diary entry where a guy talks about.
See, I think the problem with your statement is that if you go back and listen to it, the first part of it is war is hell, civilians die. It's a fact of life, and you state that in a very factual manner. Then when you start talking
oh no, Hassan, please, Hassan, you can make a basic moral analysis. Hassan, you are not morally blind. Come on, please.
All of a sudden, you've discovered morality. And you've discovered condemnation, you've discovered intent, and you are unfortunately far from alone in this. I'll give you, you know who for me is a perfect example?
Wait, hold on, just a second, examples. No, the false equivalency of the two sides is astounding. When Hamas kills civilians in a surprise attack on October 7th, this isn't because they are attempting to target military targets and they happen to stumble into a giant festival of people that...
Well, they did happen to stumble into it.
They did, but when they stumbled into it, it wasn't an issue of trying to figure out a military target or not. They weren't failing a distinction. There wasn't a proportionality assessment done. It was just...
Anyone that fucking claims that Israel is not deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure and civilians is either the dumbest person I've ever seen in my entire life, like straight up schizophrenic, delusional, okay? Or they are a bloodless propagandist. In the case of Destiny, it's...
True. I'm a bloodless propagandist. The Mossad is paying me to say that Israel is not targeting civilians because there's no evidence of them targeting civilians.
A little bit of both. Okay? Fucking, I love the optics lovers, dude. Schizophrenic in the sense that they are fucking hallucinating. Not schizophrenia equals stupid. God, I hate being a fucking leftist. You know what? I'm gonna fucking permaban you. That's it. I hate it. This is why I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it so fucking much. It is just like, you know what? I'm gonna fucking permaban you.
Tim tears tossed around for a very good reason. When he's talking about Palestinian civilian deaths, war is hell, you know, it's a fact of life, get used to it. When he was confronted with Israeli civilian deaths on October 7th, he literally broke down in tears.
One is deliberate and one isn't. He understood that.
No, that's what he tried to make us know.
Oh, he understood that. Oh, Israel is just small being genociding. They're not deliberately killing fucking just 25,000 plus women and children. They're just a oopsie. Dude.
He's
I can't. You do nothing for them. You're so disingenuous to your values. Come on, bro. I know it's the top of the hour and you're trying to...
I just don't how is it so how are people so more they literally can't fathom the distinction between collateral damage and intentionally targeting civilians. I don't understand. And when he says, like, again, I'm gonna make, like, Jesus, there's a difference, number one, between targeting and killing, okay? Every military ever intentionally kills civilians. Everyone recognizes that it is perfectly okay to intentionally kill civilians. Everybody recognizes this because everybody would say, if every single member of Hamas was in a room with one civilian, everyone would say it's okay to blow up that room, okay? Even though the civilian death is anticipated, okay? Everyone would probably say that on a moral level because of the double effect, and then and then international law says the same thing, because in order for it to be illegal under international law, Article 57, or is it Article 51 of the Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions specifically says it's only a crime if you make civilians the object of the attack. You have to act with purpose. You can't just act with knowledge. The difference is, this is the fundamental difference between these things. Israel will either act with dolus indirectus or dolus eventualis, either with knowledge or with like recklessness, right? Hamas will act with purpose, dolus directus. Like, I don't like how people are just incapable of seeing that. Like, I don't get it. I literally don't get it. It's so I don't understand. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense.